Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from MaliciousCompliance. Story 1 is by Blunt But Not On Purpose. Want all the documents? No problem. Many years ago, I did all kinds of admin work at an oil terminal. One of my jobs was to take care of the documents after vessels had been loaded. Bills of lading would usually have to be couriered to a bank, so I'd take care of that as well. Just a side note in case, like me, you don't know what lading is. I had to Google it. It is the action or process of loading a ship or other vessel with cargo. It kind of makes sense, because what is the vessel laden with? I've never heard the word lading before. Now, I said bills of lading had to be couriered to a bank, but that's not entirely true. Every time a vessel would come to load, we receive a document distribution matrix. Originals of document X to be sent to A, copies to B, C, and D. Originals of document Y to be sent to B. Well, you get the gist. I would usually completely ignore that matrix. I knew exactly who needed what, and I knew the bank only cared about the B's/L. So I'd just send them those, and it was never a problem. That is, until someone new started at said bank and would complain about missing documents. Next time, I added some more documents that I reckon might be vaguely relevant, but again, they complained about missing documents. I'm not sure why that was, only the B or L was relevant to them, but the next time a vessel had loaded, I was very happy to give them exactly what they wanted. The document distribution matrix was probably once drafted by someone who didn't know what they were doing, then ignored by everyone, so it never became a problem. In this case, however, I was going to need a bigger envelope. I followed the matrix to the letter. 1 original plus 4 copies? You got it. I was really happy because I'd spotted the fatal flaw. Some background first. For every chemical product, there is a material safety data sheet, MSDS. They contain all sorts of information regarding safety of the product, and over time, they've become monstrosities. So here's what made me so happy. The matrix also mentioned 1 original and 4 copies of the MSDS, which was a 250-plus page document. There is absolutely no reason why the bank would need even 1 copy of the MSDS, but it was in the matrix and I'd been told to follow the matrix. So I did. I printed it 5 times, copied all other documents 4 times, and ended up with a stack of over 1,500 pages. Here's where my sadism kicked in. The 3 original bills of lading, the only documents I knew the bank actually needed, went randomly into that stack. The person on the other side would have to go through the entire stack to find those 3 pieces of paper they really needed. I heard nothing from them. The next time I had to send documents to the bank again, I reverted to what I'd always sent them. Again, silence. That's when I knew I'd won. From then on, all went back to normal. Makes me wonder if this was in a time before there was, internet, because printing off 1,500 pages is so ridiculous. What a waste of paper. You sent them over like 1/10 of a normal-sized tree. But you gave them what they asked for, which is the beauty of malicious compliance. Our next story is by Silver Syndicate. You don't want a female to take the lead. No problem. This is a small bit of maliciousness that happened years ago, but to this day it's still one of my favorite stories to tell. So there needs to be a bit of context to this for you to understand the beauty of what happened. I was in a traditional kung fu school for 9 years. My sifu teacher was one of the most honest and respectable men I've ever known. In this school, there was certain etiquette you had to follow out of both respect for the art and your fellow students. We had things like bowing before entering doorways, always face north to take off your sash, stuff like that. Keep in mind that we weren't just teaching students here, we fostered a family and treated one another as if we were all brothers and sisters. One of the rules was that men wore their sashes on the right, while women wore their sashes on the left. I am a trans male, and my sifu was one of the very few people who knew this. I also present very androgynous. My sifu and I talked about it when I came out to him because I was concerned about how it would affect the etiquette of the school, and we both agreed that neither of us cared how I wore my sash, so I just kept it on the left out of habit. Very friendly conversation. At my school, we did a traditional performance every year for Chinese New Year called Lion Head Dance. If you look it up online, it's both intriguing and hilarious to watch because it's essentially two people underneath a large, fluffy papier-mâché lion. We would do this for restaurants, schools, or event centers. We even got to perform for the Chinese consulate at one time. Basically, one person is in the head of the lion while the other operates the tail, and we work together to cleanse the space to ensure a year of good fortune for the establishment and scare away evil spirits. Everyone always loved these events, and it was some of the funniest performances I had ever done. There's drums, dancing, firecrackers, the whole deal. I was almost always in a lion with my sifu because we made a surprisingly good team. One year, we went into this little Chinese restaurant who hired us to do our normal thing. We get there, we set up, lay out the equipment, and begin stretching before the performance. This performance was one lion with me in the tail and my sifu in the head. As we're talking and getting ready, suddenly the owner of the establishment walks over to my sifu and I with the most disappointed look on his face. My sifu asked if everything is all right, and this guy just started in on my sifu through gritted teeth. He originally asked why I was standing there, and my sifu, while confused, said that I was his tail for tonight. The owner said that this was highly disrespectful because a woman shouldn't be in the performance and should never be in the lion. My sifu, with a now deadpan look on his face, chuckled and basically said, we don't live in the days of Chinese dynasties anymore, sir. This is my student, I am their teacher, and they are more than welcome to perform and represent my school. The owner kept on going off about how it's disrespectful to the culture and how I shouldn't even be in the show because I was a female. My sifu looked back at me, looked at the owner, got a cheeky little grin on his face and said, "No problem." He turned to me, grabbed my sash, twisted it to my right side, bowed and addressed me as Didi, meaning younger brother, before turning back to the owner. He had the most shocked and appalled look on his face, and it took me everything I had not to just bust up laughing. The owner huffed, told us to just do the show, and stormed off. And just as a little cherry on top to this interaction, I went to get into the tail and my sifu stopped me, motioning for me to get into the head of the lion. So I got to lead the show that night, and the owner had to just sit back and deal with the fact that he didn't get his way by throwing a sexist fit. The year after, we got hired by the same restaurant, and my sifu, instead of rejecting it, made absolutely sure that the performance that night was all female students. The owner didn't say a word. Yeah, I get this is a traditional dance, and so he's got something pulling on him to make sure he sticks to tradition. But some traditions, especially sexist ones, were meant to be broken. And good on your sifu for being an excellent person. It doesn't have to be that way, and it really shouldn't be that way. Our last story today is by Heidi Hole 1234. Take you to the ER for something I can fix for free? Okay. This is a story my dad told me a while ago about one of the 2 outings he had with his brother-in-law, we'll call Kyle, many years ago. He didn't provide too many details, but it's just enough to share this story. For context, my dad and my Uncle Kyle were very different people. My dad was very much a do-it-yourselfer who learned a lot about how to fix things himself and what to do if something happens with tools like nails, hammers, fishing hooks, etc. My Uncle Kyle was the opposite. He was one of those people who just paid other people to do things for him or just complain when he couldn't get his way. Basically, never let other people tell him what to do if they weren't trained professionals. One day, my dad and Uncle Kyle went on a fishing trip because my mom and aunt wanted them to hang out more and get some bonding time in. They really didn't have much in common except for their wives being sisters and having kids of their own. That's the strange thing in itself right there. You have two brothers, and one marries one girl, and the other one marries that girl's sister. You don't hear about that sort of thing happening that frequently. During this, Uncle Kyle somehow managed to get a fishing hook through his thumb with the end of it poking out. Uncle Kyle started screaming and rocking the boat, yelling, "This hurts so much! Call an ambulance! Now!" My dad said, I know how to get the hook out of a finger. It happened to me before. What you need to do is get a pair of pliers and cut the hook part off and pull it out of your... Kyle, I don't care. I'm injured. Take me inland, find a payphone, and call an ambulance. Dad, are you sure? I have the tools to... Kyle, now! Dad, well, if you insist... So Dad rowed the boat to the shore, found a payphone, and my Uncle Kyle called for directions to the nearest ER. My dad drove them both there, and my dad waited patiently in the waiting room for Uncle Kyle to come out. Not 10 minutes later, Uncle Kyle came out with a bandage on his thumb and a scowl on his face, which was pretty much his resting face. Before the doctor went back to his area, my dad went up and asked him how they got the hook out. Turns out they did exactly what my dad was going to do. Cut the spikes off at the end of the hook and pull the thing out slowly. The only difference was that it cost my Uncle Kyle $200 and an "I told you so" from my dad. My dad said that after that they never did any solo trips ever again. My uncle blamed my dad for the whole ordeal, even though he was the one putting the hook in the line. He was fine, he was just complaining about everything. Miss you, Dad. Thanks for a fun story to share. All right, this has triggered actually 2 of my memories. I love when these stories trigger memories from my childhood. They're both not super happy stories, but I'm going to share them with you anyway. One time, my brother was out fishing in one of those little paddle boats. I don't know, I think they're called paddle boats, but they don't actually have paddles. They're the ones with the pedals on them. And the little, stick that you use to steer. He went out fishing in this pond, and I just heard him screaming from out there. And apparently he caught a big fish, and the fish spit the hook through his thumb. I'm pretty sure he did end up going to a doctor for that, but that's one memory that this triggered. And as somebody who has a twin brother, who happens to actually be named Kyle also, it was not a good memory. It actually gives me a little bit of an ill feeling in my stomach when I think about it, because you never want to see one of your siblings get hurt. And the other story that gets triggered from this is one time I was in technology class in high school. We were doing basic woodworking in this class. It was tech class, and we had some downtime, and somebody had brought in a little airplane with a spring-loaded propeller. And people were taking turns winding up the propeller with a little stick and putting it on the ground and then letting it go, and it would take off. It would kind of fly around in the classroom. This was downtime day. There were no machines running or anything, so we were being safe, or so I thought. And it was my turn, and I love airplanes. But I used the little stick, and I wound up the propeller blade, and I let it go, and the propeller, hit my fingers, and that's no big deal because it's a piece of plastic, and it stopped. But what happened is my thumb was out, and the propeller blade went around, and it pushed my thumb around so fast that it went right through the spring hook that was around the propeller blade. And I still have a kind of deformed thumb if you look at it, it's got all these ridges on it. But I think it was 17 at the time that happened, and I was bleeding everywhere, and I was in so much pain, and my thumb was turning purple. But I didn't go to the hospital for that. I went to the nurse. We had to pry the propeller off of my finger and hold the spring in place. But I just went home with a bandage on it, and I had a super, it cracked right through the thumbnail, right through the middle of the thumbnail, right into my thumb. So I can't say I was tough, because I definitely was whining and crying the whole time about it, but I didn't go to a doctor for it. I just went and saw our nurse, and it healed just fine. Alrighty. A little gruesome, but that's it for my personal stories, and for our stories for today. You guys know what that means. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a pristine day.